I tell you, the two of us, we contained ourselves while we stood there, but when we got away, we couldn't stop laughing. It was funny.
Yeah.
You had very funny experiences.
That was going door to door. Do you remember Gus Scholl being active?
Oh yes, Gus and Kathy.
Yeah. So then, as I remember, then it was either you or Pat Taylor got us out of the bar and into the Carpenters Hall for meetings. Was that your idea?
No, well, I don't remember that. I remember when we went to the Carpenters Hall, it was a big change for us.
Yeah. And you remember the fashion shows that you and Pat would put on?
The what?
Weren't there fashion shows put on to get women active?
Oh, we used to put on fashion shows. We were right up to date.
Now, what about, were women kept just as secretaries or to clean up, or what role did the women play?
They were kept baking cookies. They were baking cookies and making cakes and seeing that the men were well fed. And nobody ever asked them what they thought or what they believed or anything else.
What did you do to change that?
Well, I got elected state vice chairman.
And then what did you do?
Well, I took a good look around. It was pretty hard to tell. There was one, well, I guess I won't even tell about that because she may have relatives left. But there were people, there were women. There was one woman in one county. I went out to the county, and they said, oh, yes, they had women active. There were 7 different groups, and none of them spoke to each other. Well, I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't. Here you were trying to win elections, and you weren't speaking. So I made some, and what they wanted, every club wanted to have a piece of paper that said that this was the only club in that county. Well, I wasn't about to get caught in that trap because I wanted every woman, regardless of her club, to be a part of this organization. So I refused. I made some enemies with that because, well, one woman invited me to her home for a meeting. She was having her club there, and she invited me for the meeting, and she was trying to make me understand that I should give her club the paper that said she was running the whole county. Well, I went to it, and I got in, and there was a table set up, and there was a lighted candle on the table, and there were pictures. It looked for all like a religious kind of thing. And in the middle of all of this was hanging this announcement that they were a club. It didn't say they were the club. It said they were a club in this county. And I took one look at it, and I made up my mind that that was the end of that one as far as I was concerned. It was a wonderful start for me. And so I said no. Well, she made it very clear that they didn't want everybody in their club. That was one thing. They didn't want to have everybody. I said, we're going to have a federation of Democratic women. And I said, every officer from every club will be written to. We will let them know when the meetings are, and we will invite them to participate. So I did. And that was the way I cleared up that business of 999 clubs, because they found out it didn't work. It wasn't going to work for them, and it sure didn't work for me.
Did Neil work with you on getting women active in the party?
Oh, yes. And his wife was a jewel, Burnett.
Well, now, was that just to have women active to clean up and make cookies, or was
No, Neil Stabler was a sound citizen. And Neil Stabler, I'm very glad I had a chance to be vice chairman with him, because he worked with me all the time. There was never a time that Neil wasn't at one of those meetings that we had. We had state meetings regularly. And the women. And with a different, like Muskegon would have it, and then people in Grand Rapids would be on that committee. they'd have registration, or they'd have some. Each one of these other committees outside had something to do at that other meeting.
Yeah.
And you take them by areas. And Neil and Burnett too were always at every meeting. Of course, you know, Burnett was a find because Burnett wrote the cleverest performances. She was a very gifted woman. Besides having a beautiful singing voice, she could write the cleverest performances, which people were able to perform. And so the other thing is that there never was a time we had a meeting but once that Madeline Williams wasn't there.
Yeah.
He came, the Federation of Women met, he met with them, except one time when he was abroad, and then that time I got a cable from him on that day telling me that he, for the women, that he was so sorry to miss the meeting. And but Neil and I saw things eye to eye. Neil was an expert in foreign relations because he traveled all over, and every place he went, he studied. And he knew what he was talking about when he got talking on foreign relations. He wasn't talking from the newspapers. He was talking from his own experiences. He and Burnett would go and stay a long time and visit. He went to Russia, I don't know how many times, and they went into homes there. They took big chances and interviewed the public. And as far as I was concerned, Neil, there wasn't anything he wouldn't do to help me make a success of things. He was always there to advise, and he was always there to perform, and he approved of what we were doing. I wanted every Democratic woman in Michigan to know she was welcome, and that we would not only welcome, but we wanted very much to have her participate. And we studied. We made a business of at every meeting of doing some studying on certain issues. Maybe they were issues that were before Williams. Maybe they were issues that were national issues. But we tried to learn. And we gave out lists of books and all that kind of thing to people. So I think we did our duty in educating.
Well, I think this is important, that what you've done is show that women weren't just to be secretaries and dishwashers.
Oh, no.
Now, do you want to talk about Governor Williams? You talked about the time you first met him. I know you and Governor Williams were very close, but why don't you just tell us a little about the relationship?
Well, from the time that I ran as delegate, I used to go with Hicks sometimes, because remember, Martha was in Washington. And so he would take me when he was going from one place to another, and I would go, and what he was trying to do was to teach me, and I needed that, and I learned a lot. Hicks was it was too bad that he didn't have the disposition that let him stay on as a leader, but he couldn't bear opposition. But he was, as far as his ideas were concerned, what he wanted was what I think all of us wanted. And I think that I always felt that my job as a women's leader was to teach them, give them work to do, give them ideas, as many ideas as we could get. You know, we had something I think the public never knew. Before every state central meeting, state central committee was divided into committees. And we sat down. There was one committee for the women who were delegates. There was the one on public performance. There was one on registration and one on getting out the vote. And I think the newspaper men had a difficult time trying to understand us because they never had been to a political meeting where that kind of thing